Hello and welcome to Spokane County Spotlight. I'm County Commissioner Al French, representing District 5 in West Spokane County. For today's program, we're joined by Sheriff John Nowels, who recently presented some crucial data to a joint meeting of the Spokane County Board of Commissioners and the Spokane City Council. That data highlights the increasing drug-related overdose deaths and ongoing challenges faced by our law enforcement and public safety agencies. Sheriff Nowels, thank you for being here.
First of all, thank you for having me. It's been a great opportunity to come and kind of inform the community about some of the things we're seeing. As we were talking earlier before we started recording, I'm a lifelong resident of Spokane. I've been here for now going into about 52, 53 years. And this is not the Spokane that we had certainly 40 years ago and certainly not even 15 years ago. And some of the things, to include fentanyl, are posing some pretty significant public safety challenges to us. And I think it's going to be a good topic for us to discuss today.
Terrific. Well, I look forward to it. It was a very informative presentation you did to the joint meeting. So let's dive into the data. We've seen a significant rise in overdose-related calls over the last few years. Sheriff, can you share with us how this surge has impacted your department's resources and operations?
It's just an added workload to our agency, but it goes far beyond just law enforcement. Certainly we have been impacted. Our deputies are all carrying naloxone. All of our first aid training now includes how to address certain overdose issues. It's adding that many more investigations, which we are responsible for. And but what it is doing to our fire service personnel and our medical response personnel, it has almost solely accounted for their double-digit increases in calls for service over the last 5 years.
Wow. So the data also indicates a five-fold increase in naloxone deployments. Can you explain what this trend tells us about the state of the drug crisis in Spokane County?
Well, certainly drug use and drug addiction is nothing new to Spokane, is nothing new to this country. But fentanyl specifically poses some problems that other illicit substances don't. Certainly they're all dangerous, certainly they're all illegal, but fentanyl is so potent and is so deadly that it brings on a whole new dimension. And this increase in overdose deaths shows just exactly how addictive fentanyl is, but it also shows just how inconsistent dosing can be for people who decide to use, and they end up taking fatal doses inadvertently, certainly not intentionally. We do have some where it would be intentional, but most of the time people don't understand how inconsistent the potency of that drug can be, and it takes their life.
One of the most concerning trends in the data is the rise in fentanyl-related deaths. According to our medical examiner, Dr. Singh, our numbers in Spokane County are going up, while other areas around the state and the country are going down. Why do you think that may be the case?
I think there's probably a couple of reasons. Primarily, honestly, the state of Washington, the legislators in the state of Washington, and certainly it's not all, but certainly the majority of the legislators in the state of Washington have kind of taken a hands-off approach with drug use. It is certainly unpopular to take enforcement action. We know that the Washington State Supreme Court a couple of years ago invalidated our felony possession of controlled substance statute. And I think with the best intent, our legislature has come up with a fix, but it's not enough to deter people from using drugs. That in combination with, I think we have raised a generation of people that think that they can take a pill and makes everything go away. And I think given, we now have a generation of users, and it's probably more than one generation of users, who would have never considered using heroin, they would have never considered using crack or cocaine or anything like that. but now they have this illicit substance that looks just like a pain pill that gets prescribed by a doctor, or it can be made to look like a Xanax, which is prescribed by a doctor, and there's not quite the negative stigma to using that. And this is such a deadly substance. So I think it's a combination of all those things that are causing this rise and was what makes this epidemic so dangerous.
Well, and I think one of the other things that I've noticed is that the younger generation has a sense of invincibility, that they are not going to encounter the negative impacts that are clearly part of the drug community and stuff. So we also see methamphetamine and cocaine contributing highly to overdose deaths. What specific strategies are being employed to tackle the drugs in our community?
Well, we're coming at this problem from several different areas. I mean, obviously the enforcement arm, where we are going after the mid to upper level drug traffickers, drug trafficking organizations here in the region, statewide. We're certainly working with federal partners to tackle that. We're also involved with other strategies such as SAFE, the Spokane Alliance for Fentanyl Education. We spent a lot of time working with that group, trying to get into schools and particularly warn young adults and children about the dangers of fentanyl. And, you know, we talk about the 330 something overdose deaths in Spokane County, and a few of those were young people who didn't know they were ingesting fentanyl. One of the biggest problems that we see with youth is they think, you know, maybe they've been given a prescription for Xanax in the past or some other drug to deal with anxiety or some other medical issue. And they think that they can go online to Snapchat or some other social media site and purchase legitimate Xanax from somebody. Well, the reality of it is in this day and age, unless it comes from a pharmacy, it's almost certainly, in fact, I will say it is certainly fentanyl and not whatever they think they're getting. And so that poses an immediate risk because far too many people die overdosing on fentanyl that just didn't know that's what they were taking.
Yep. So last year, the Board of County Commissioners invested in the Real-Time Crime Center, and your team has been able to outfit retired patrol vehicles into camera on wheels system, or what we commonly call now COWS. The board also invested in a new analyst position to help identify and disrupt the drug trafficking organizations. How are those efforts helping to contribute to your office's response to the drug crisis?
Well, I will tell you that I think the Board of County Commissioners have made several critical investments in the last 2 years in our community that helps my office specifically do their job better. The Real-Time Crime Center is certainly an example of ways for us to provide eyes out in our community. It helps us locate people that we're looking for faster. I mean, and it's not just people who might be out committing crimes, but it's also people who might be missing or endangered or something to that effect. But it has really been a force multiplier to us in ways that we couldn't have anticipated how successful the program was going to be. We had an idea. And thankfully, you and the other county commissioners decided that you would take a leap of faith and invest in it. And it has really, really been a game changer in public safety. Again, with narcotics enforcement, surely, but in all aspects of law enforcement, have those cows, you know, deploying them down in the city areas where some of the businesses were struggling with, you know, vandalism and other kind of vagrancy issues. We found that just having those cows in those areas has just stopped all of the quality of life kind of crimes that occur down in those areas. And we found the same thing in unincorporated parts of Spokane County as well, for sure. But for the money spent, the savings to our community has been immeasurable, and it's just been nothing but positive feedback.
Yeah, I heard nothing but positive comments about the cows, and probably the only negative that I've heard about them is there's not enough. You know, the community and different parts of the county are constantly saying, well, how about deploying one of those up here by us? And, you know, they're just not enough to go around, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
For sure.
So So thank you. I know the board also invested in a sheriff's helicopter to upgrade our capabilities. Can you tell us a little bit about how the air unit contributes to combating drugs?
So certainly, the helicopter is a surveillance platform that benefits us, not only in narcotics enforcement arena. I mean, obviously, it's great to have eyes in the sky, and the equipment and technology that is on board those airships is second to none. And I think we're getting ready to take delivery of this new helicopter here in the next week. And it'll be nice to have that capability back, and technology is on the forefront. So not only do we use it in narcotics enforcement, but you know, there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of years about traffic pursuits, you know, pursuing criminals and whether it's safe or not. Well, having these airships and have them available to us allows us to follow suspects and do it at a safe distance to where they don't feel like, the suspects don't feel like they have to drive recklessly to avoid us, and they don't realize that there's a helicopter 7,000 feet above them watching everything they do, recording it on a camera. So it certainly makes the public safer. It allows us to do good police work and not endanger the public unnecessarily. So it allows us to do a lot of things that other jurisdictions wouldn't be able to, in addition to search and rescue missions and things like that. But offering support to officers and deputies on the ground, it just makes it safe for everybody in the community.
You know, thinking about the Real-Time Crime Center, you know, as I got to review that, the introduction of that system, the one thing I thought about was the TV show called FBI, where they have a bank of TVs and they have analysts and operators that are able to assist the people in the field with, you know, knowing what's going on with regard to detection, cameras and stuff. But the other thing that you do with the cameras and that system is you also allow for people that own an office building, for instance, that have cameras on the exterior of the building, if they would allow your system to be connected with theirs, it just expands the capability. And I believe you're also expanding it into the school systems as well. So it's a great asset and gives you a lot more eyes on the street to keep the community safe.
That's correct. And the community can partner with the Real-Time Crime Center and the Sheriff's Office through the Spokane Sentinel system. And it does give the Sheriff's Office access to video feeds, live and latent, if that's what they want. And they can be some cameras. It doesn't have to be all cameras. But I think we have, you know, well over 10,000 cameras, I think, in our system when you include all the schools. We don't have any of District 81 schools in our feed, but I think all of the other schools outside of Spokane Public Schools have come into our system. We're working on naming conventions. And it really allows us to respond to critical incidents at school immediately. To give you one example of the benefit of the Real-Time Crime Center and having access to these cameras, you know, and it's quite an expensive endeavor, frankly, as you well know. But you know, about 2 years ago, we had a fake school shooting call out at Central Valley High School. By the time we came to the conclusion that it was fake, there was well over 40 law enforcement officers in the parking lot of that school, armored up, taking positions to see what was going on. And that can be traumatizing to the kids, and it certainly disrupted what was going on in the school. Well, fast forward to about 6 months ago, we had an incident out at Ridgeline High School where it was the same call. And because we had an RTCC analyst and operator on duty who knew how to research IP addresses and things like that, we were able to determine that it was a hoax before anybody showed up on scene. Between having access to the cameras to see that it wasn't going on, and then having the ability and the technical expertise to research IP addresses, we were able to not disrupt the school. We were able to not traumatize the kids by having all the law enforcement officers show up.
So back in April, when you presented this data to the city and the county, we were all they're discussing use of our respective opioid treatment settlement funds. So the Board of County Commissioners has funded additional treatment beds at the STARS facility on Cali, And last May, we also announced a long-term investment in expanding our Regional Crisis Relief Center with 23-hour sobering services. Can you share a little bit about how these have impacted the drug crisis and your efforts?
I think these are probably, this investment that you have made and are making is probably going to be some of the most impactful investments on people in our community. A lot of people were unaware that back during when COVID first started coming around and we started shutting down services and things like that, that we were down to like one sobering bed in the city of Spokane. As this opioid crisis is ramping up and, our overdoses and our drug use and our seizures are doubling and tripling year over year, our ability to get people into treatment beds was just cut out from underneath us. So this investment in the stabilization center and then now in this STAR center is critical to us. It has made an immediate impact on our ability to take people who might be in active addiction or might be, highly intoxicated, and give them a place to go that's not necessarily the jail. This community is well aware, and as are you, Commissioner, that our jail is far overcrowded, and unfortunately, people who might be committing crimes or might be high or who might be in crisis, we don't have room or capacity for them right now. So these investments by the Board of County Commissioners for people who might not benefit from the criminal justice system, but will certainly benefit from treatment, are now getting put into programs that have proven to work. It allows us as law enforcement to solve an immediate problem, to get somebody off the street or get them out of a situation that they're in, get them someplace where they're safe, someplace where they can get the treatment that they need, and maybe start working towards long-term solutions. And we know the data showing that it's working.
Yeah, the stabilization facility is one of those many programs where Spokane County was the first in the state to actually construct and open and fund one of those facilities. And it has made sure that people that need treatment can get it without going to jail and without getting a criminal record for the fact that they are suffering from a mental crisis or alcohol or some other substance abuse. So looking ahead, what do you see as the most urgent needs for your department in 2025 in order to combat the rising drug crisis and everything else that your team has on its plate?
We just spent 15 minutes talking about all of the resources that we've been given. And we're certainly grateful for it. And I almost feel guilty saying we just need more of the same. You and I both know that the budget is going to be a topic of discussion, and I can always use more officers. But now I've gotten to the point where I'm saying, you know what, I'm just happy to be able to fund the officers that I have, full well knowing that this community is on the verge of needing to fund some pretty significant investments in the criminal justice system. Our cops know what to do. My biggest challenge as the leader of the Spokane County Sheriff's Office right now is I have a lot of young cops who really are out there trying to do a good job, and I've got to make sure that they have the tools and the training necessary to do their job professionally. That's my challenge. Now, when we're talking about challenges to the community, one of the biggest things I think we're facing is how do we make sure the criminal justice system is funded and has the capacity to actually keep their community safe long-term? Long-term beyond when we go out, handle a situation, maybe we take somebody into custody and they get brought into the criminal justice system. How do we make sure that everything happens after arrest is funded appropriately and we have outcomes that are, number one, good for our community, but also are done with an eye towards the offender not reoffending again and making sure that they don't come back into the criminal justice system again. That's a huge challenge, and it'll be a challenge forever. But I think you and the other county commissioners agree, like, public safety has to come first, and we got to have our people that we serve feel like they can go to work, that they can go to our parks, they can go to our golf courses, that they can go to school and they can go to work and not be afraid of who they're going to run across on their way there.
Well, and the other part of it is that you've got a great force and sheriff deputies out there that are dedicated to this community and keeping it safe. And they have put their lives on the line every day to make sure that we do stay safe. And they need to know that the leadership of this county is behind them 100%. And I think that's what this board has tried to do in terms of not only providing resources, but other legislative support and activities to try and make your job easier if that's possible, but support you in your efforts to keep this community safe. And so we appreciate what you do. And the deputies on the street every day, you know, I make a point every time I see one of saying thank you. Thank you for doing what you do to keep me and my family safer. So I believe you referenced earlier working closely with the Regional Anti-Violence Enforcement and Narcotics Task Force, otherwise known as RAVEN. Can you share how this collaboration is helping to curb the rise in drug-related deaths and also bring together resources for different agencies?
Well, as you spoke to earlier, you know, you've used some of the opioid settlement dollars to fund an analyst who is assigned up to that task force. Raven is it used to be the Spokane Regional Drug Task Force. It's been the Spokane Safe Streets Task Force in the past. It gets rebranded as different members of that task force come and go. And so right now, Raven's focus is for the county's mid to upper level drug trafficking, our gang emphasis, and violent crime. And everything that group does is aimed at reducing the amount of illicit substances coming into this community, which should have an impact on our overdose death rate. But with the analysts there who provided to the board some of the data that I have shared in the last couple of weeks, that's how we know how to attack this problem. The data that analyst comes up with, and it starts to paint a picture of what we're facing. Well, for somebody whose job, like mine is, to decide how do we approach this problem, having that data gets us pointed in the right direction to say, listen, this is what's happening in the community. These might be possible causes, and these are some of the strategies we can use to attack them.
So you've mentioned a partnership with the Spokane Alliance for Fentanyl Education, otherwise known as SAFE. Can you tell us a little bit more about the partnership and the role it's playing in raising awareness and reducing overdose deaths?
Yeah, so SAFE, the SAFE Alliance was born a couple of years ago, and it's a partnership between the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Race Routine Foundation, Spokane County Sheriff's Office, Spokane Police Department, and the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Spokane. And the goal for SAFE is to educate as many people as possible, whether it be young people, whether it be business organizations, on the dangers of fentanyl. And you know, we go out and we have youth summits where we get together and talk with a couple hundred youth at a time about the dangers of fentanyl. We have people who are recovered, people who work in law enforcement, people who work in the treatment industry about the things they're seeing with fentanyl. We go out to schools and we give you know, classes there. And I'm pretty quick here, for the second time in 2 years, I'm going to go and do a training on naloxone with the folks up at ESD 101. And so that's just some of the different things that we do with SAFE that we think are making a fairly positive impact in Spokane.
I know a lot of parents out there are anxious when they see news reports about teens overdosing, sometimes after taking counterfeit pill they thought was a prescription drug. Recently, the Board of County Commissioners extended funding for deputies to serve as school resource officers. Can you explain a little bit about how the Sheriff's Office is working with schools, youth organizations, and other community partners to prevent drug use and in our younger populations and overdose.
So I certainly love the relationship the sheriff's office has with the school districts that we serve. I'm proud to say that we have a school resource deputy in every single high school that we serve in Spokane County. The deputy's presence in those schools, it's not about being a cop there to arrest the bad actors. It's not about that at all. It's about the deputies being there, part of that small community, because let's be honest, every single one of those high schools is a small community. And we get to engage in community-oriented policing, building relationships with the kids who are there. And when it matters is when you have things like kids coming across drugs in the school, or, heaven forbid, a lot of these school threats that we get. Our deputies have already built relationships with the kids in the school, so they get better information, they get faster information, and they get better cooperation because of the relationships they have with those kids. It is so invaluable, that program. I have also asked a couple of my undersheriffs to start looking into reintroducing the DARE program. And it's not necessarily the same DARE program that was being put on through the 80s and in the early 90s. It's a lot more about teaching our kids how to be resilient, and it's kind of an anti-bullying campaign. But what we do know is as kids become more resilient and learn how to overcome peer pressure and to deal with bullying, they're a lot less likely to engage in activity like drug use. I will say, one things our parents can do, and I know some school districts in Spokane County are starting to do this, is we have to take our kids off of their phones. They have disengaged from us. We have disengaged from each other, and they are engaging with sites that nothing good is coming out of.
So those resource officers, the beauty of that program is that they do create relationships with the youth in the schools, and that relationship demonstrates that the sheriff deputy is not the enemy. He's your friend, and he's there to protect you. And so, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I'd like to thank my guest today, Spokane County Sheriff John Nowels. I'm County Commissioner Al French. Thanks for joining us today on Spokane County Spotlight.